وطن واحد.
مرحبا بكم. Share the show. Yes, I know it's out of the zone. Patricia, salamat, marhaban. Share the show. Thank you, Hakim. Share the show. Welcome to the Voice of People. And please don't forget to share the show. Share the show with your friend. Tonight, we are going to discuss one of the interesting topics. I'm waiting for our guests to join the show, and we can start this kind of historical topic. It's very important to learn from the mistakes from the benefits. I'm going to share the show. Sabata is saying the music is louder than what I'm saying. People are not hearing what I'm saying. خلينا نقول لكم مساء الخير أينما كنتم وكذلك صباح الخير أينما كنت. Let me say good evening where you are, and also good morning where you are. So welcome to the show this evening. طبعا نحن قبل كان عندنا توبيك تانية وكلنا بنعلم انه الزمن بتاعت كورونا people is staying at home. طالما لو ما في شغل, it is better انه we have time and there is a topic we need to discuss it, we can come in and discuss that topic. So الليلة نحن نناقش حاجة مهمة. أنا أفتكر أخونا بطرس يتكلم عنه امبارح ونينا يتكلمنا عنه في الشو الفات. الناس اللي كانوا متابعين في الشو الفات أنا انضم لنا مولانا إيمانويل تقريبا أول امبارح، وركزنا في اتفاقية بالذات الأسباب بتاعت العدل لتقسيم بتاع جنوب السودان الكوكرة. وانا سالته اسئله، انتوا كلكم كنتوا الناس اللي كانوا شاهدوا اللايف فيديو. It was very interesting discussion. ومولانا ايمانويل اتجاوب على الاسئله بكل شجاعه، وبرضه according to his historical background. So also like he said in that show, he liked the history and he's an historian. So الليله نحن the same التوبيك اللي ناقشناه تقريبا كان يوم السبت. It was on Monday. كان on Monday تقريبا. اللي هنا no, it was I think it was بول فات. أنا ما بذكر يوم اللي فات. لكن المهم بالنسبة لي أنا داير أقول هسه yeah, it was on Monday exactly. كان يوم Monday. yes, كان في Monday أول امبارح. فأنا داير أقول للناس المشاهدين إنه الليلة اللي احنا دايرين نناقشه الليلة هنيجي نداقش نتكلم عن اتفاقية أديس أبابا والأسباب. we are going to talk about Addis Ababa Agreement in 1972 and who was the responsible for its collapse. الزول كان مسؤول من الفشل بتاع أديس أبابا كان منو؟ هل كان ده الجنوبيين؟ هل كان ده صراع بين الجنوبيين؟ لأنه كان في صراع موجود بين الجنوبيين. هل ده صراع بين الجنوبيين or جعفر محمد نميري is the one played the role. امبارح هنا برضو كنا تابعنا والدايفرسيتي وسيستر تريزا ومع الأستاذ بطرس. He did a very wonderful job. So we are going also الليلة هنا هنستمع هنستمع ضيوف بتاعنا. We have two guests. Our guest tonight is Ambassador Emmnuel Ajawin and Ustaz Sabata Ramba. Sabata Ramba, they are our guests tonight. So please be with me until our guests came to the studio or come to the studio. Just share the video. Don't forget to share the video. The main question also we are going to ask, what can we learn from the mistake to better future? هو الهدف من الحلقة ده والهدف من النقاش اللي نحن نناقشه الليلة ماذا نتعلم من الأخطاء بتاعت الماضي. وده ده السبب اللي نركز للمشاهدين إنه نحن كشعب بتاع جنوب السودان بنتعلم من شنو من أخطاء ده حسنا بنعتبره mistake. So what are we going to learn from our mistake? ارتكبنا أخطاء في اتفاقية أديس أبابا 72. ارتكبنا أخطاء بعد استغلال بتاع جنوب السودان 2013. كذلك عيدنا الأخطاء. القيادة السياسية عادت الأخطاء في 2016 بعد توقيع اتفاقية 2015 وتستمر الأخطاء. In addition to that, all of us we are seeing and we are watching what is going on among the people of the South Sudan. So let just أنا بشغل الموسيقى وننتظر الضيوف. مرحبا بك أبونا فرانسيس. مرحبا بك. Welcome to the show. Let's wait for Ambassador Emmnuel Ajawin and Sabata and Emmnuel. أنا رسلت لكم اللينك. Please, both of you check your messenger and that join the show. Join the show. Let me خد نشان لعدي مع Ambassador Emmnuel انضم. السلام عليكم.
سلامات باشمهندس.
والله الكرفتة والبدلة كله عينة.
ثانك يو.
هذا تقول زي بتاع شعب ملكان زول يا زول كان ماشي على كويس كده تقول والله نيم اقول لك يا زول وين يا زول.
شايفيننا كمان لابس افريكان دريس وكده وخلاص قلنا كمان شويه كمان نلبسنا كرفتة وفي جو الكورونا فيروس ده شويه نرفع مورال.
هذا فايز ثواني ملكان قال اصلا ده فني شنو بس فني بس قال كان هو في مناسبه ما في مناسبه كانوا ما طالب اليوم ده لازم يلبس بالبدله وكان في تأثير برا ده لازم ايده حياه ماشي.
ايوه. مرحبا بك.
مرحبا بك سيد السفير وكنا نديك فرصه ترحب بالمشاهدين.
في البدايه thank you باشمهندس Edward for hosting me. Let me also greet you and greet your audience who are faithfully watching tonight. The topic that you have started on Monday, and I think was kind of an informal testing, but we got into it in terms of the Addis Ababa Peace Agreement. But the objective, as you stated clearly for today, the Addis Ababa Agreement is an agreement that brought the longest war, which lasted for 17 years, from 1955 to 1972. It was actually a milestone in the modern history of the Sudan and also for the people of South Sudan. It may have been welcomed with a sense of jubilation, like the agreement in 2005 and the agreement in 2015 and the agreement in 2018. But yet, people were oblivious about the danger and the shortcoming of the Addis Ababa Agreement. The today discussion that we're trying to hold is try to look at the historical aspect of the Addis Ababa Agreement. What went wrong with the Addis Ababa Agreement? What made it to collapse? And also, there has been an issue of so-called the redivision, or what that was known by Kokora. We need to get to the nitty-gritty of it because I believe history is important. We need to learn our past so that we are able to judge our modern time and our present, the political, economic, and social conditions. That help us also to be careful of how we can chart the way forward. South Sudan, as we speak, Bajmahandis, is at crossroads. South Sudan is either we exist or we don't. You could see the political rhetoric that are there today on the Facebook. And if you could see the political rhetoric, they will use, the issues of Kokora, the issues of this tribe against that, and justifying it. Now, we as South Sudanese is incumbent upon us, compatriots and nationalists, that we have an important duty and task upon us, that regardless of our political differences, regardless of the past, South Sudan must move forward as a united people. Unity of South Sudan can only be achieved when we address the past correctly, so that we are able to move towards our future with confidence. So these are a few remarks I just wanted to make before we start.
شكرا جزيلا سيد السفير ومرحبا. Sabata, you are saying you are not able to copy the link. Please copy the link and paste it into Google Chrome if you are using Google Chrome. ما بيشتغل لك بأي حاجة تانية مثلا لو using iPhone ما يشتغل لك بسفاري ولا بإنترنت Explorer. So copy the link and paste it in Google Chrome and it will bring you on show. زي ما تقولت مولانا جنوب السودان في مفترق الطرق ودينا محتاجين ندرس التاريخ بتاع جنوب السودان بنوع من هنا نرسم الخارطة للطريق للأجيال بصورة صحيحة. فمرحبا بك. أنا هنا زي ما أنت قلت قبل شوية topic Addis Ababa Agreement 1992 who was the responsible for its collapse and what was the reason for Kokora. يعني هنا طبعا الناس كتير مرات بيحاولوا يلوموا او ما بيعرفوا الاسباب الحقيقيه ورا الكوكرا. عشان كده انا سالتك يوم الاثنين انه السبب كان ورا الكوكرا شنو. الفيديو ده ما قاعد بالمناسبه، خليني اعتذر بيكوز انا بس الفيديو اتمسح لانه ما كان حاجه رسمي، فيري انترستنج فيديو وكان جميل، لكن للاسف لانه سم تايم حاجات اللي بتكون بتيجي من شر الافا وبتكون جميل. فلذا الليله we have a chance also to repeat الكلام in terms of going back to the historical and being giving details. So مرحبا بك، نخدي فرصة to start.
Yeah, thank you, Edward. And let us have some housekeeping. Yes. I think the audience who come here, let us be respectful of ourselves. Exactly. There's someone now, for example, called Jacob Guy. He's commenting here, all this nonsense will not help you, Edward. Please don't fool yourself to educate people. You know, such a people and such a negative comments does not help for us as South Sudanese to move on. The forum we have is an intellectual forum. So let us disagree to agree, but let us disagree in a civilized manner so that we could put our views across. Having said that, Edward, let me start with the issue of the Addis Ababa Agreement. But let me, before I touch the issue of the Addis Ababa Agreement, let me take you back a little bit, because it's going to be a historical day in terms of the history. So it needs us to dig a little bit down so that we could appreciate the dynamic of the Addis Ababa Agreement and why it collapsed. In 1955, August, when the Anyanya was formed and the mutiny of Tuareg, the people of South Sudan were demanding openly the secession of South Sudan from the north. South Sudanese, before the independence of the Sudan, they were promised by their brethren in the north that we will give you federation. And the federation was the slogan at that time by the Liberal Party, which we had in that discussion, which unfortunately the video got deleted. Federalism was adopted as a policy by the Liberal Party at that time. Liberal Party, to those who don't know, the Liberal Party, it was the first ever South Sudanese political party. It was formed in 1951. It had a regional a diverse representation from the various parts of South Sudan. It had people like Uncle Abdurrahman Sule, who came from Equatoria. You had people like Boddio, who came from Upper Nile, is Nuer, and you had people like Santalas Payam, I think also. So you could see that from Baragazal. So you could see that the Liberal Party was actually a unity kind of South Sudanese. At that time, when the 1953 conference was called in Egypt for all the political parties, Sudanese political parties, to meet in Cairo to decide the independence of the Sudan, South Sudanese were not called. The Liberal Party was not invited. Hence, the future of independence of the Sudan was done in the absence of the South Sudanese intellectuals, and hence the Liberal Party. Now, the Liberal Party put forth federalism as a formula for South Sudan to have a special status within a united Sudan. This went well, but nevertheless, Northern Sudanese were using it. You were using this as just a lip service to South Sudanese to comfort them. But North Sudanese intelligentsia at that time were not serious, especially the Umma Party and the DUP that were led by Merghani and also by Sadiq al-Mahdi. They were not interested in implementing federalism per se. So when the call for federalism by South Sudanese parliamentarian was louder in the parliament that time, the Northern Sudanese decided to make a coup similar to what Bashir did in '89, handed over to General Aboud. Cyril Khatim, by the way, he was a colleague to General Aboud, and they were very good friends. So they decided to hand over to the military, so that with the hope that the military will crush the rebellion in South Sudan and will quieten the demand of South Sudanese for federalism. Now, when Aboud became when he became the president of the Sudan, Aboud abolished any debate to do with federalism at that time, and Aboud developed a slogan that there's no federation for one nation, federation is separation. Well, the slogan of the Aboud. Abu did not only stop at that. By saying that, he killed the political discourse that was supposed to take place regarding the issues of federalism. And now what did Abu do? Abu embarked on a serious military campaign in South Sudan. And from 1959 all the way to 1964 until October, Intifada, these are the main period in South Sudan that war was escalating beyond anyone's comprehension. It was a displacement of people of South Sudan. But nevertheless, Anyanya continued to organize themselves, and they continued to be a formidable force. In 1965, a roundtable conference was convened in Khartoum. I think it was in March, if I'm not wrong. Now, the round conference, we had people, South Sudanese intellectuals who were outside. SANU has already split at that time into two. William Daniel, at that time, disagreed with the SANU outside that was led by those of Joseph Oduo and Agri Jaden. William thought by going back to Khartoum, he can advocate much better the issues of federalism and so forth while he's in Khartoum. While his colleagues disagreed with him that we have to continue the armed struggle, for change. So what William then did in 1960s is similar to what, let's say, Dr. Riak in 1997, and those of Dr. Lam, what became known as Khartoum Peace Agreement, and for sure the Peace Agreement. They thought by going to Khartoum, they could get the right of self-determination, and Dr. John remained in the bush to continue. The same thing, William then left his colleagues in the bushes of South Sudan, and he went back to Khartoum, thinking that the North Sudanese will be able to offer him what the political demands that he wants. So William then went inside. Now SANU split into two. SANU split into two. You had the SANU inside and the SANU outside. Now the SANU outside that was represented in 1965 Roundtable Conference was led by Agri Jaden. Agri Jaden by then was elected as the president of SANU. So he took the presidency of SANU from Uncle Joseph Oduo, and Oduo became, I think, the Secretary General of SANU. Nevertheless, the importance of the Roundtable Conference was for the northern elite and the southern elite to discuss the way forward. The conference was highly attended by observers from Nigeria, from Uganda, and from other places. Now, in that conference, a couple of resolutions were made. The Northern Sudanese said that any solution regarding South Sudan must be within a unified Sudan. Okay, must be within a unified Sudan. I could also mention, for example, the representative of Nigeria at that time, who was the Minister of Mining. He said, the Minister of Mining at that time of Nigeria, Mr. Yusuf Mitiam, he said that any solution to the problem in Sudan should not be similar to what took place in Nigeria and Biafra, which basically mean they're not encouraging the separation of South Sudan. Also, the representative of Uganda that time, Mr. Onam, just give me a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Let's give Ambassador 1 minute. Yeah.
So the Ugandan minister at that time, Mr. Onam, also echoed the same sentiments. He said that any solution to the Sudanese solution must be an African solution, and should take in mind that Africa is not ready for division. Okay, so you could see that the rhetoric at that time in the Roundtable Conference 1965 was anti-separation of South Sudan. The Roundtable Conference concluded without really any agreement. Southern Sudanese could not agree. They went and formed what they call the 12-man committee to draft the resolution of the Roundtable Conference. Now, why did I talk about the Roundtable Conference? This Roundtable Conference that was rejected by South Sudanese, and especially the Anyanya, the resolutions of it, will later on form the basis for Addis Ababa Agreement. Now, let us come to Addis Ababa Agreement, okay, and why Nimeri signed it. Nimeri signed the Addis Ababa Agreement under a duress. But before the signing of the Addis Ababa Agreement, in June, 9th of June, 1969, when Nimeri, after he has taken over the government and the presidency after his successful coup of May, just 1 month, Nimeri said this. He made a public statement. He said that he expressed his willingness to grant South Sudan regional autonomy. Okay, he expressed his willingness to grant South Sudan regional autonomy within a united Sudan. Okay. Now, so you could see that Nimeri was actually trying to capture the spirit of 1967 round table conference, because in that conference they said that South Sudan requires a special status within the Sudan, but they did not talk what kind of a special status. You know, is it federalism? Is it autonomy? Is it local government? So Nimeri came with the slogan that he's ready to resolve the problem in South Sudan, and hence this is the slogan that he put forth. Also, it has to be recalled during 1969 and the earlier 1970, Anyanya 1, 70 to 71 as well. Anyanya 1 became a formidable force. They started getting logistic from Israel, and also I think Idi Amin at that time in 1970 was helping them. So Anyanya was becoming a formidable force. 80% of South Sudan territories at that time was under the Anyanya. But before I go ahead, let me quote references, because Nihnam Kawan, Madarin Kalamandaya, dia Bajmahandis Edward.
Yeah, exactly.
Madarin Kalamandayas and Dayad. There is an article. There is an article written by a guy called. Let me look at his name here. Yeah, there's an article written by a guy called Alexia Harisides. The title of it was what? The Southern Problem. The Southern Problem. The other article is entitled The Full Circle, an overview of Sudan Southern Problem since independence. Okay, it was written in the journal called Northeast African Studies. Is volume 11, number 2, and it was written in 1989. Another one, let me look for another, because it's good for us to have this for those who would like to go and study. There's another one also, another article written by someone called Stephanie Bestwick. The title of the article is Addis Ababa Agreement, 1972 to 1983, harboring of the Second Civil War in the Sudan. Again, the journal is Northeast African Studies, volume 13, number 2 to 3, 1991. There's another one, Addis Ababa Agreement and the Sudan's Afro-Arab Policy, Journal of the Modern African Studies, volume 14, number 2, 1997. Okay, and also there's an article that was written by Professor Nyamelel in 1990. You know, these are also articles that are worth looking at. So you have an overview of Sudan's southern problem since independence. Okay, I will be quoting a lot of it later on. So it's good for us to pause here and mention some articles so that we know that at least there's some term of reference we are looking at, and I'll be quoting the pages later on when I'm going ahead. So now, Addis Ababa Agreement. Why did Nimeri sign the Addis Ababa Agreement? Nimeri was facing a lot of difficulties. One, Nimeri was facing Anyanya as a formidable force, as I said. 80% of South Sudan countryside was under the control of the Anyanya. So Nimeri realized there will be no outright victory against the Anyanya. The second issue was the political problem in the north itself, especially after the 1971 coup by the Communist Party. Nimeri has already alienated the Umma Party. He has already alienated the Islamic Party and the Turabi, and Turabi was in Kober at that time for Sigin. Okay. Now, in 1971, there was a coup by the communists. Nimeri decided to go against the communists. So what did Nimeri do? He executed all the leaders of the Communist Party, those of Joseph Garang and others. And then he also dismissed, he actually chased away and closed the Russian embassy in Khartoum. You know, now closing of the Russian embassy in Khartoum mean cutting off the link, diplomatic link between Khartoum and Moscow. Moscow was very instrumental of providing military hardware to the government of Nimeri. So by chasing the Russian diplomat from Khartoum, Nimeri has really, shot himself on the foot, which means he has cut all the logistic that was supposed to be given to him by those of Russia. The other third element, it was actually the issue of the economical crisis in the Sudan. Things were getting very difficult, because of the war and the upheaval that was happening in the country. The economical situation in Khartoum was very dire. So Nimeri had no other choice but to reach to an agreement with the Anyanya. Since he started sending envoys to get in touch with the Anyanya. First was Joseph Garang, before he disagreed when Joseph Garang was the Minister of Southern Affairs. He reached out to the Anyanya, it wasn't successful. But the success of the Addis Ababa peace talks was actually initiated by the World Council of Churches through his regional office of the All African Council of Churches. And they will play a very instrumental role in terms of moderating and being the facilitators to these peace talks in Addis Ababa. The moderator by then of the African Council of Churches was Canon Berger Kerr. He was the man who was really instrumental in terms of moderating and being facilitating the Addis Ababa peace agreement. Now, the last issue that also pressured Nimeri to reach an agreement with the South is the continual political and diplomatic pressure from Egypt. Egypt at that time, they were interested in digging Canal Jungule, So Egypt knew in order for them to carry out the project of canal successfully, they cannot do it in light of the civil war in the South. So what the Egyptians want, they wanted to have a peace agreement in the South so that they're able to dig Canal Jungule. So Egypt was also putting enormous pressure on the Nimeri regime. Now, the delegation of the Anyanya to the peace talks was led by Isbuni Mundiri, who was the head of the delegation. The delegation of the Sudan government was led by none other than Maulana Abel Alier. Abel Alier was the only South Sudanese, by the way, who was in the delegation. It's still a mystery to many of people why Abel would lead such a delegation. The promise that Abel got from Nimeri. Let us look at the conditions that the South Sudan Liberation or Southern Sudan Liberation Movement put forth for the negotiations. Anyanya or the SSLM put four conditions. One, the SSLM, they wanted to be recognized as equal negotiating partners by the regime. So they wanted to be recognized, that's one of the conditions for the negotiations, as an equal partner, to the government of Jafar Nimeri. That's the first demand they had. The second demand they had, they said, the peace process in Addis must be conducted, or the negotiations that to be arrived at in Addis Ababa, or an agreement to be arrived at in Addis Ababa, should be within an international context, which means they wanted some international guarantee to the agreement. That's number two. Number three, the SSLM delegation said that ceasefire should be in operation. Ceasefire should be in operation during the negotiation. So they wanted ceasefire while they're negotiating. So they said ceasefire is very important for a conducive negotiation process in Addis. Number four, they wanted the Sudanese troops to be confined to their barracks, so that they did not come out and attack the Anyanya forces. These are the 4 conditions that were set by the SSLM negotiating team in Addis Ababa. For the term of reference, you can refer to the Financial Times, November 1971. If somebody wants reference, you can go to Financial Times, you can Google it, November 1971. These conditions are there for the Anyanya. Now, what is important here is why also the Anyanya decided to sign the Addis Ababa Agreement. Anyanya was under tremendous pressure from South Sudanese in diaspora, especially those who are in East Africa. South Sudanese were saying that they're tired of the civil war. Now they wanted an agreement to be done. Agreement has to be done at all costs. The international community also were putting pressure on the Anyanya, saying any agreement is better than the continuation of the war. So nobody really gave a damn about whether this agreement will address the root causes of the conflict in the country, or this agreement will really succeed. What was there was a tremendous pressure for Anyanya to sign the agreement. The other issue also that people look at is the issue of Idi Amin Dada. The government of Idi Amin, when it came to power first, Idi Amin was amenable. He was more sympathetic to the people of South Sudan and to their cause, because many people, there's rumors, I don't know how true it is, that the father of Idi Amin Dada, he is actually from the Kakwa tribe of Sudan, but moved there earlier. So Idi Amin naturally had sympathy with the struggle, and he helped a lot in terms of allowing the Anyanya politicians to stay in Kampala. But in 1970, Idi Amin changed his attitude. He became Muslim, and he became too much close to the Arabs, and hence Anyanya, they realized that the game may be up. If Idi Amin does throw his weight behind Nimeri and being close to the Arabs, that also could mean a death sentence to Anyanya, and also could mean, real serious setback, both politically and militarily. Hence, Anyanya decided that it is time for them now to make an agreement and to save their faces, because the worst of it is for them not to get any logistic and for them to militarily be defeated by the government of Nimeri. That will put them into a weaker negotiation position. So people went to Addis Ababa. Now let us look at the environment and how the talks was conducted in Addis Ababa. Now, the Anyanya, apart from the conditions they put, the government of the Sudan, led by Maulana Abel Alier, they decided to make the following. Okay, the government delegation deliberately, led by Abel Alier and also as a lawyer, created loopholes in the agreement to allow Nimeri government a leeway to interpret the provisions of the agreement as he wishes. So the agreement was designed in a way by those of Abel Alier and Mansour Khalid, 2 prominent lawyers, in a way that the provisions of the agreement are not absolute. The provisions are left loose so that Nimeri could interpret the agreement the way they want. Okay. Now, also another reason that led to the failure of the Addis Ababa Agreement is what I mentioned. Anyanya was very much in a hurry to achieve peace and for them not to be seen as obstacle to the peace agreement. But another important issue, because the collapse of the agreement itself by Mohandes Edward is not the abrogation of the provisions of the Addis Ababa Agreement by Nimeri later on in 1980s. But these are the main important issues, 2 things that happened. One, the intended and the deliberate creating of loopholes within Addis Ababa by those of Abel and Mansour was meant as what you call the landmines that will blow up later on. Okay, it was created as a landmine that will blow up later on in the face of the agreement. Now, another issue that is of importance is that the Addis Ababa Agreement, the government predetermined the context of the talks. What do I mean by that? يعني حكومة السودان قرر بأنه محادثات في أديس أبابا يكون في إطار فريم ورك معين. الفريم ورك كانت شنو؟ الفريم ورك بأنه أي محادثات وأي اتفاق مع الأنيانيا لازم يكون في إطار السودان موحد. ده واحد. ثانيا بأنه لو في نقاش عن الفيدرالية وعن الحكم الذاتي ما يكون حكم الذاتي بالمعنى بأنه يكون عنده سند دستوري. لا. They wanted to give them a local government. So the talk itself was predetermined by the regime in Khartoum, you know. And to support this is a quotation by Abel Alier. Abel Alier on 3rd of March 1972, during the press conference after the ratification of the agreement, Abel has this to say, and I quote: "The discussions," that is the quote I'm quoting, "the discussions, this is discussion of peace agreement, will discuss nothing out of this framework." End of quote. You know? So Abel Alier was saying that Junubin, you're only allowed to discuss within the context of the framework of United Sudan. That is it. Mafi Federalia, Mafi independence. This is what we allow you to talk about. Now, what framework was Abel Alier talking about? Okay. Before the negotiations of Addis Ababa Agreement, Nimeri made a presidential decree and constituted what he called the Presidential Committee. The Presidential Committee was tasked to draft a framework as a position, negotiation position of the government of Nimeri. Who were there in the negotiations? Who were there in the committee? The people who were tasked to draft the committee were four. One was Dr. Mansour Khalid. Two, Dr. Jafar Mohammed Bakhid, a historian. Number three, Major General Al-Baghir. Okay, Major General Al-Baghir. And then you have also Major General Mohammed Abdel Gadir. Okay, so these are the four people that constituted what Nimeri called the Presidential Committee to draft a position of the government for the Addis Ababa peace talk. Let me repeat them. Dr. Mansour Khalid, one. Dr. Jafar Mohammed Bakhid, two. Number three, Major General Al-Baghir. Number four, Major General Mohammed Abdel Gadir. All these, to footnote, are Northern Sudanese. There's no single South Sudanese in this committee. Now, what was the term of reference for this committee? There were four terms of reference for this committee, you know, where they based their documents or their position. It was based on the following. One, there was a paper that was presented by Dr. Jafar Mohammed al-Bakhid on the history of the Arab in the Sudan. So this also formed a base for the paper that they drafted for the Addis Ababa peace talks. Number two was the report of the 12-man committee. The report of the 12-man committee is a committee that was constituted on the round table conference of 1965, where they rejected the autonomy of South Sudan, where they rejected separation of South Sudan, and where the Northerners were saying that any solution to South Sudanese problem must be done within a united Sudan. Yeah. So that's the document they use as a term of reference to draft their position to Addis Ababa. Number three was a proposal submitted by South Sudanese within the country. Okay? الجنوبيين اللي كانوا موجودين في خرطوم هم كمان they had a paper on southern problem, how to resolve the southern crisis. And the last one was the People's Local Government Act of 1971. The People's Local Government Act of 1971 is the act that will later on establish the autonomous regions of South Sudan, the three regions as we know it. So these were the terms of the reference for drafting the position for the Anyanya for the government delegation to go and talk to the Anyanya. Now, for the importance of the discussion is what we call the Southern Sudan Provisional Provinces Regional Self-Government Act of 1971. This act is very important because this is the act that will make South Sudan as an autonomous region after the agreement. It was a short document, constitutional document, consisting of 9 chapters and 33 articles. Now, chapter 1, 2, 3. Chapter 1, 2, 3 of the 1971, the Southern Sudan Provinces Regional Self-Government Act of 1972 defines the autonomy region of South Sudan as follows. The southern, I quote, the southern provinces of the Sudan means the provinces of Bahr el-Ghazal, Equatoria, and Upper Nile. Okay? It is actually based on this act that the regional, the autonomous region of South Sudan and the government later on that will be formed, the regional government, will be based on. So this act of 1972, which consisted of 9 chapters and 33 articles, chapter 1, 2, 3 defines the autonomous region of South Sudan as the 3 regions that I have mentioned. And this is in accordance to their boundaries as they stood on 1st 1956. So these 3 regions is what has been given, this is what actually constitute the autonomous region of South Sudan, you know, and therefore they stood with their boundaries as on 1st 1956. And any other areas that were culturally or geographically a part of Southern complex as may be determined by a referendum. Okay, this is the local regional act. Now let us come to what happened. Okay, now once the Addis Ababa Agreement has been concluded successfully, those of Lago could not wait. He couldn't even last. He flew to Le Khartoum. Nimeri decided to appoint Maulana Abel Alier as the president of the High Executive Council, as interim president of High Executive Council for 18 months, with the intention that after the 18 months, you will have an election, you know. This was rejected. This was not accepted by people like Joseph Oduo and Agri Jaden. Agri Jaden did not accept this, did not like it, and many of the Anyanyas, they saw this as a sold out. Anyanya felt that the agreement was theirs. It is them who fought the war. Why will Abel Alier, a member of a government delegation and a head of government delegation, should lead, you know, the government of Southern Sudan? And he was not even part. He was living comfortable in Khartoum, and he was not even part of the Anyanya. So many of the Anyanyas were not comfortable by this. Nevertheless, Nimeri went ahead, you know. Now, let me also make a footnote that the Addis Ababa Agreement was not accepted or was not welcomed by other Northern Sudanese political forces, especially the Ummah Party and the Islamic Brothers with Akhwan al-Muslimin. That was under Turabi. And by the way, when the Addis Ababa Agreement was signed, there was a famous quotation by one of the Northern Sudanese politicians. He said this, and I quote, he said, "Is this world coming to an end? Is this world coming to an end now that our former slaves have a government of their own?" End of quote. يعني واحد من الشمالين اللي كانوا موجودين في الاخوان المسلمين كان بيتساءل يعني بانه الدنيا ده يعني وصلنا نهايه يوم القيامه، يعني وصلنا يوم القيامه العبيد بتاعنا الانبار الامس القريب ده كانوا العبيد بتاعنا بقى عندهم حكومه في جنوب في دول في منطقه اسمه جنوب. So they were very angry about it. They were saying they cannot allow the former slaves to have the autonomous region, you know, in South Sudan. That was the sentiment by Northern Sudanese. So apart from it, also let me look at other quotations. There was also a public speech in 1980s in Manchester University. In 1980, in Manchester University in England, the Minister of Cooperative in the Nimeri government, his name was Farouk al-Maqbul. Farouk al-Maqbul was an Islamist, and he was a minister of cooperative in the Nimeri government. He went and he spoke this word in front of North Sudanese, the Islamists, in the Manchester University. He has this to say. He said, and I quote, that Nimeri, that was in October 1980. He said, Nimeri is a sick man and is a spent force. He will hand over the government to us, the Muslim brothers. But we told him he should hand over the South Sudan to us as he found it before 1971. We know how we will deal with them, which means South Sudanese. Whether Southerners like it or not, Nimeri is going to divide South Sudan. Let me quote. This is what Farouk al-Makbul said at the time when he was a minister of cooperative in Nimeri. He said Nimeri was a very sick man and he's already a spent force. He will hand over power to us, the Islamic brothers. Okay? But we told him that he should not only hand power to us, he should hand over the South too. South Sudan should be handed over to us as it was before 1971, 1972. What does it mean? That South Sudan should not be autonomous. South Sudan should be wholly given to them as North Sudanese, you know? And he said, we know how to deal with South Sudanese. Whether South Sudanese like it or not, Nimeri will divide South Sudan. Now, this is very important, okay? This is very important. Now, the Islamist brothers and other parties from the North, after the famous reconciliation of 1977, Masama Bur-Sudan Agreement, you know, Nimeri decided to reach out to Sadiq al-Mahdi, and he decided to reach out to al-Turabi, you know. Now, the Northern Sudanese started to embark on four things to do to actually render the Addis Ababa Agreement useless, especially Al-Jabha al-Islamiyya, okay? They decided that they need to undermine the Addis Ababa Peace Agreement. How are they going to undermine Addis Ababa Peace Agreement? They came up with 4 formulas. One is they wanted to dilute the political strength of southern region by creating similar autonomous regions in the north under the national plans of decentralization. Okay, what does that mean? Whom they're saying now, South Sudan has been given autonomy. Now, Nihna fi Shamal Kaman, they're in Lal Markazi. Okay, that way they dilute, you know, the so-called Southern Autonomy, you know, which was actually a special case in the Sudan. Now they're saying, no, it's not a special case. Even the whole Sudan can be decentralized. That was one of the plans, to dilute the political strength, you know, of Southern Sudan. The second plan that they had, they wanted to dispossess the Southern Sudan territory and territory of economic significance. These plans was to be accomplished through legislative means and legislative means, okay, through the regional boundaries. So they wanted to create a legislative means of how to divide South Sudan into autonomous regions, you know, or what do you call the redivision that they wanted South Sudan to be, as Nimeri wanted it in 1980. And also they felt that some territories in South Sudan could be annexed to Northern Sudan and encased in point was Bantu. You know, when oil was found in Bantu, Nimeri decided that Bantu now, rather than belonging to South Sudan, Bantu will be made belonging to the presidency, and he made a presidential decree taking Bantu to be part of the presidency, you know, and calling it Wahida. Number three, they said they wanted to subdivide southern regions into 3 autonomous regions, okay, weakening the collective bargaining power of southerners against the central government. Okay, so they also wanted the redivision of the South Sudan. By the way, the government of Junubin have the redivision now, and this will bring us to Kokora later on. This is the Northern Sudanese plan. That was plan number 3 that they had. Okay.
I have a question. I need to ask you a question. Then we continue.
Yeah, you can ask the question if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, السؤال أنا داير أتراودك مولانا أنا داير تركز شوية عشان برضو بعدك تواصل عشان المشاهد برضو يكون في الصورة. لو أنت لاحظت قبل الير هو كان الرئيس بتاع الموفمنت شيف اوف موفمنت لكن من وقعوا اتفاقيه نميري عين ابل الير كرئيس بتاع المجلس الاعلى في جنوب السودان. هو قام شال ابل الير كان شال لاغو الى خرطوم وبعد ذاك خدتاه في رينستيتنج في جيش وبقى جنرال انسبكتور بتاع جنرال انسبكتور بتاع الارمي في السودان. After 2 years later, بعد سنتين after 2 years and a half later, جوزيف لاغو قام نميري قام شال عينه اللي هو رئيس بتاع ديفيجن ساوث ديفيجن بتاع الجيش في جنوب السودان. انا دايرك تركز ليه مثلا مع نميري وقع الاتفاقيه، ليه نميري يعين قبل الير على جوزيف لاغو. طيب التنفيذ بتاع الاتفاقيه انا الرئيس بتاع حكومه ما زال كان في خلا. عشان الناس يكونوا في
You know, this is why we said Addis Ababa Agreement from the outset was not a strategic agreement by Nimeri. Kan ma itifaq strategy, okay? Bila kan itifaq tactici min Nimeri. Nimeri wanted to bring in the South so it could strengthen his base so Southerners could help him to crush the other Northern Sudanese. Remember when Addis Ababa Agreement was signed, as I said earlier, Nimeri had problem with the Northern political forces. He had problem also with the army. The economy was not doing well. So Nimeri wanted an ally, okay? The ally that they wanted was only for tactical reason, so that once he built his base, he will dispose of that ally. So when Nimeri went to discuss the Addis Ababa Agreement, Nimeri did not look at it from the strategical point. Addis Ababa Agreement was meant to bring Southern Sudanese in. Now, the problem you had with the Anyanya was this. Anyanya did not have enough time to examine all the provisions and articles of the Addis Ababa Agreement carefully. The one. Anyanya also coupled with the pressure by South Sudanese, by the international community, by Uganda, and the rest, Anyanya was desperate. Anyanya was desperate to reach a deal, you know? So all this blur the Anyanya from looking at the issues of power and wealth, you know, like you have, for example, in CPA or any other agreements, you know? Anyanya should have concentrated on a provision of power sharing, okay? Power sharing with the North. So Anyanya would have insisted that Lago should be, you know, for example, the president of the High Executive Council. But Anyanya did not put these demands on, you know. Anyanya actually signed an agreement without achieving anything that they have fought for. Look, Anyanya wanted independence, okay? Homa Ligo, okay? Now they came to Addis, say, Khalas, let's try federation. Federation Zatu Nazabalir made sure there's no even discussion about federation. So what did they end up with? They end up with a local government that those of Abel Alier came with and those of Mansour Khalid. The local government is what was actually agreed on for roundtable conference, which Anyanya rejected in 1965. So Anyanya accepted something that they rejected through those of Agri Jardin in 1965. So Anyanya signed an empty agreement. Okay. Now Nimeri, of course, Abel Alier became the Ibn Sudan al-Mudallal. Okay, or the beloved son of the Sudan, as Nimeri used to call him. Now, Nimeri wanted to bring Abel to ensure that the project that they had of undermining the agreement goes on, you know. And you could see later on when Abel Alier became the president of High Executive Council, after the 18 months finished, Nimeri again went and renewed it, okay, and gave him another 5 years. What?
Yes.
And you could see what Abel has done. Within 5 years, Abel was very strong supporter of Ganal Jungule, and he was saying if Ganal Jungule means beating South Sudanese with a stick so they can go to heaven, he will do it. Okay. Abel Alier also played an instrumental role in making sure that Anyanya forces have been observed quickly. It's not 6 months, it went through the process. And I'll go later on to the numbers of Anyanya 1 that were observed. 6,000 of Anyanya, Abel made sure that they were observed into the army. Police was 3,555. Prisons was 742. Civil service, 973. So the total of South Sudanese observed was 11,270. Even when the observation and vetting process was taking place, South Sudanese were complaining, you know, about this process, the way it was going. Abel Alier continued in his public utterance, assuring Junubin Binu Mafi Mushkila, international community, that there's no abrogation of Addis Ababa. Kalam ta Junubin de Kalam Farik Sakit. everything is going well. So you could see that Nimeri had an interest of ensuring that Abel Alier becomes the president of High Executive Council. So Abel could be able to implement the plans of Nimeri. So if I could, maybe I've answered your question, but if
very good, very good. Yeah. Very good. شكرا لك مولانا. وده أنا داير جنوبين يفهموا كويس النقاش اللي قاعد يقوله مولانا ده. لا, we don't want to blame ourselves. أنا ما داير نرجع في الجنوب to blame ourselves. To continue, أنا بس I need to quote في كلام ده هنا وتعلق عليه وبعدين تواصل في كلامك بتاع جبال. تعلق فوق. I need to support what you just said. في كتاب كتبه واحد اسمه ديفيد اتش شنان. So أنا في الصفحة ما في الباراجراف قاعد يقول هنا implementation of Ababa Agreement. أنا ما أقول بس في كلام كتبه في النص. كتب هنا قال في النص قال اتفاقية ومحمد عمر البشير محمد عمر البشير who served as a secretary of the 1965 round table conference.
Yes.
secretary بتاع المؤتمر بتاع المائدة المستديرة.
Yes.
أنا داير أقرأ الكلام ده عشان تعلق وتمشي لأنه لازم يفهموا إنه أديس أبابا نيميري ما كان عنده نية تimplement أديس أبابا peace agreement. So نشوف كلامه كتب محمد قال شنو. محمد قال طبعا هو كتب كلامه قال in 1974. Muhammad كتب 1974. In a book published a year later, which is 19. قال it would be fair to conclude that during the first year following the agreement, the Northerners and Southerners Sudanese accepted the challenge of peace. One, Bashir الصفامية وتسعتاشر. Bashir went on to won. Bashir went on to won. ده 75 74 book كتاب طلع في سنة 75. However, that the Addis Ababa Agreement and what followed was just the beginning of more difficult and complex task. The promotion of economic and social development in South and the consolidation of political unity of the Sudan. Bashir, page 1 and 20. So continue. That means Bashir, Aluakan Masik al Maida Mustadiri, he won from the beginning. That is going to face more difficult. لأنه كان دي لمن نميري الشمالي مرة ينفذ اتفاقية.
Yes. So you could see that. Yes.
أنا داير تربط بعدين شوية تعلق في النقطة ده. أنا ما I don't want to jump نربط الكلام مع الاتفاقيات الماشي بعد 2013 لأنه ده same المهندسين.
هنربطهم بعدين. Yes, هنربطهم بعدين.
أبونا مولان. So واصل ألف في كلام بتاع محمد واصل في كلام تقول جبال.
كلام ده واضح. هنربطها بعدين كمان بالاتفاقيات and كيف نحن we could learn from the mistakes of Addis Ababa Agreement.
Exactly.
Yeah, in the Northerners, there was no secret from them. The agreement or Addis Ababa Agreement was not strategic to them. It was only a matter of time for them to dissolve that. That's why Nimeri said, "Unity ma Quran wala Injil." So there's nothing that will hold me to implement the agreement. So anyway, you see that when Abel Alier was made the interim president of the High Executive Council in South Sudan for 18 months, and his time came to an end, he was actually opposed by Agri Jaden, and he was opposed also by Uncle Joseph Oduo. They were not happy, they were not comfortable by it. They thought that the victory of the Anyanya has been hijacked by Nimeri and Abel Alier. Now, of interest here is Abel, when he was trying, now when his term finished of 5 years, and he wanted to stand for election, the tension was very high in South Sudan. Many people felt that, it is time for Abel to go. Abel is not trustworthy. So Nimeri, fearing the anger that was happening in South Sudan, decided to appoint Joseph Lago. Lago was brought now as the president of the High Executive Council. Lago will last only for 2 years. Okay. Now, let us also look at the period of what did Lago do. Because history, we must be fair, Jama. The Tariq. Okay.
Exactly.
Now, Lago was very authoritarian in his approaches. And within a short period of time, Lago disagreed with many of his colleagues. Not only that, the head, at that time, the head of the regional judiciary, they closed the Juba courts on the ground that Lago was ignoring their rulings. You know, that means they were accusing Lago of interfering with the judiciary at that time. You know, Lago was interfering, like the same thing now. What is happening in Juba? Not only that, politically, Lago made a critical mistake. He went ahead and dismissed the speaker. Okay, he dismissed the speaker and the deputy speaker of the regional assembly and replaced them by his supporters. Now, this also made people very angry. Lago was becoming a dictator. You know, Junubin complained and they went to Nimeri. Nimeri then issued a decree which was also in contradiction with the Addis Ababa Agreement and dissolved both the government, and also he dissolved the assembly. Now, I actually wanted to quote some legal provisions so that you could see that Nimeri was acting unconstitutionally by dissolving these parliaments. Let me see if I could get it here. Yes. So let me quote the articles that came, you know, under the agreement itself, you know. So in the agreement and also the act that was 1972, it says that the president of the High Executive Council and his cabinet could only be subject to removal by two doctrines. Okay. The first doctrine is what they call the implied doctrine of impeachment of the president of High Executive Council and his members. The second doctrine is what they call the principle of a veto, okay, or a vote of no confidence, which will be exercised by the Regional People's Assembly. These are the two methods available of dismissing the president and perhaps the parliament. The impeachment clauses establish that, and I quote, the People's Regional Assembly the People's Regional Assembly may be by 3/4 majority request the President of the Republic to relieve the President or any member of the High Executive Council from the office. The President shall accede to such a request. However, in case of vacancy or a vote of no confidence against the President, okay, the High Executive Council and the whole cabinet must resign. Okay. Article 12.2 establishes that in case of vacancy, relief, or resignation of the President of the High Executive Council, the entire body shall be considered as having automatically resigned. Okay. Those were the laws that were there. So nobody initiated anything in the parliament, but Nimeri went ahead. Okay, dismiss the Joseph Lago as the president, dismiss the whole People's Assembly, the Parliament. So what did he do? He brought back Abel Alier. Okay, he brought back Abel Alier. Okay, now Abel Alier. Now this is very important. Now for the reference, I want people to write this down. There's an article written in a journal called the Northeast African Studies, volume 11, number 2, 1989. There are 26 pages. It's written by someone called Tim Allen, and the title is An Overview of Sudan Southern Problem Since Independence. I'll be quoting this guy enormously because he wrote a lot about Kokora. Okay, this is a very important article. Now, Abel Alier, second coming. Abel, according to this guy, Abel Alier appointed a cabinet that was predominantly Dinka. Okay, Abel appointed a cabinet that was predominantly Dinka. This created a lot of anger, especially from our people from Equatoria. You know, they felt that they fought the war, you know, they achieved the agreement, and now people are playing, you know, with what's supposed to be their fruits of liberation and their labor. So, by Abel appointing most of his cabinet as Dinka, this did not go well with the people in Equatoria. And let me read from this article, page 55. Page 55 in the article, and I quote, and I'm reading.
Yeah.
On returning to office, Alier had short-sighted, made no attempt to associate anti-Dinka feeling in Juba. Instead, he appointed a cabinet in which Dinka predominated, and many Equatorians politicians were so incensed they began demanding a separate region of their own. That's the end of quote. Okay, so he is saying the second coming of Abel Alier and the appointment of the majority of cabinet from Dinka has angered many of the Equatorian politicians. And many of the Equatorian politicians, they started demanding, you know, a separate region, you know, which means that Equatoria should be a different region from the other two regions, which is Upper Nile and Baragazal, you know. And he goes ahead, and let me read, and he says, after 1979, when Amin regime fell, Lagos' position had been greatly enhanced by the return of the numerous educated Equatorians. Who had remained in Uganda after the 1972. Many had enjoyed a relatively high standard of living in exile and expected to find this at home, okay, owing to their superior East African education. That is a quotation from the article by Tim Allen. The article, as I said earlier, is an overview of Sudan's southern problem since independence, published by Northeast African Studies, volume 11, number 2, 1989. And this is page 55. So in this page, he's saying that Joseph Lago position in 1979 was even made stronger by the influx of the coming Equatorians who are well educated, you know, with the East African superior education, who came now to Juba, who came to Juba from Uganda, from Congo, from Nairobi, and they're well educated. Now, when they came, they found a different reality, and I'll go on later on. They found that the so-called Nilotics, and the Nilotic in this reference is the Dinkas, the Nuers, and the Shilluk and others, they have been dominating the positions, you know, of government in Juba. This also did not go well. And let me go on reading, because this is very important to understand one of the reasons of Kokora later on. Okay?
Exactly. Very good.
And he said this, after these returns of educated Equatorians now, who have come back now to South Sudan, okay, who are well educated, given the superior East African education, to their dismay, their qualifications often were not recognized, okay, and opportunities were limited due to their lack of Arabic, okay. Inevitably, their resentment was directed at the Dinka and other Nilots who occupied most of the important administrative positions. Lago played on this sentiment in hopes of establishing an Equatorian region in which he will have power and in which he believed will rapidly modernize it if it were not tethered to the other two southern provinces. Okay, and let me go on. And he says the outside faction, which means the Equatorians who came from outside, has changed radically. They became radical in this demand that they wanted South Sudan to be divided. They want a greater autonomy for Equatoria and let the two regions go back to their own homes. This they thought will create jobs, opportunities for them. Now he says this group increasingly define itself in terms of hostility to the Dinka, rather to the opposition to the north. However, such veteran Equatorian politicians as Uduo and Isbuni Mundiri found themselves more in sympathy with the militant Nilots than with their own Equatorians. So he's saying, although these sentiments may have received some support and majority of support among the Equatorians, Equatorian politicians like Joseph Uduo and Isbuni Mundiri, they did not agree with these sentiments of the redivision. They are not comfortable with it. Now, the Dinka, and I'm continuing reading from this article, the Dinka became the scapegoat to everything that had gone wrong in 1970s. Okay? Dinkas became the scapegoat. I'm reading from his article. It was even argued that the Dinka politicians had deliberately hindered Equatorian development so their own people could catch up. And this guy footnote this. There was, in fact, some evidence to this, notably in the field of education. So Equatorians were saying the Dinkas are actually undermining the development progress of Equatoria. And this writer is saying there was some truth to this. The Dinka politicians, and this is quoting it, were able to give a scholarship to their sons and daughters, and educate them. This did not go well with the majority of the Equatorian. Now, bear with me, Edward. It's important.
Yeah, it's okay. No problem.
Yeah. Because now Hukumut Abel Zato Bagas will fail. Abel is start going also into problem. Abel is start going into problem with the Equatorians. Majority did not like what Abel was doing. But also Nimeri was not comfortable with the Abel government, especially with Bona Molwal. Bona Molwal, at the time he was the Minister of Mining. Bona Molwal went and made a deal. Yes. At that time, Bona Molwal was made the minister of the regional. It was the minister of the regional of was the minister of industry and mining. Was the regional minister of industry and mining. Bona Molwal went and negotiated a deal with several Arab Gulf states, where Bona Molwal secured $9 million, for agriculture and industrial development. Now, this also was a very contentious issue. Bona, Moshe, without Gurush, in the Gulf, he managed to secure agreements with the Gulf countries so that the government in South Sudan could industrialize and also build an agricultural industry in South Sudan. This did not go well with Nimeri. Manao Junub Sudan haikun go iktisadiyan. Nimeri told Abel Alier to dismiss Bona Molwal. Okay, he told Abel to dismiss Bona Molwal. I'm trying to say also why Abel was in problem now with Nimeri. Abel became problematic with the Equatorians due to the predominant cabinet Bitao Kulu Denka. The second issue was Bona Molwal. Now, Nimeri suggested to Abel to dismiss Bona Molwal from the government. What Abel Alier did is opposite. Abel Alier went and made Bona Molwal Minister of Finance. Okay, he was made Minister of Finance. Now, these, of course, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. Okay, this appointment get Nimeri, and Nimeri decided to dismiss the parliament, dismiss the government, and hence dismiss the parliament, and appointed Gismal Abdullah Rassas, okay, as the new interim president of the High Executive Council. Okay, Major General Gismal Abdullah Rassas was appointed when Abel was dismissed and his government was dismissed. Now, two things were taking place. The call in Equatoria for redivision of South Sudan was becoming loud, although some of the Equatorians were disagreeing, those of Uncle Oduor. Okay?
Who initiated the redivision?
Redivision, actually, as I said earlier,
among the Equatorians.
Among the Equatorians, as I said, is Joseph Lago. Okay? Joseph Lago was behind it for his own personal interest. Okay? He did not like Abel Alier, and many others, like some of the Equatorians who came from the East Africa, as been quoted by this writer, also played an instrumental role. They came back, they were qualified, and they cannot get jobs. You know? And the government seat was in Juba. So they felt Juba is in Equatoria, is in Equatorial region. What prevents and well-educated Equatorian sons and daughters to get a job? You know, if the jobs are being dominated by the so-called Nilotics, they need to go back to their own homes so everybody could develop their home. You know, so this also strengthened the position of Lago against Abel Alier. You know, so the seed of redivision has already started. Now Nimeri has seen this now coming. So what does Nimeri do? He has seen that Abel Alier now, he's not listening to him. He's not obeying his orders. He told him to dismiss Bona Molwal. He goes and appoints Bona Molwal again as the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. The Equatorian voices are calling louder for the redivision. So he decided to remove Abel Alier. Now, when he removed Abel Alier, he appointed Gismal Abdullah Rassas, okay, as the caretaker, president of South Sudan region.
Molana, with a twassel, of supporting what are you saying?
Yes.
And I can cut up Gale, Iten Malguta, you quote from a writer for who Mushahidi can get a good lay, Masalan. Let me support what you are saying now. This is a different writer, David. Let me read this, what David said. Like, those are watching live video because according to this now, it means like in South Sudan now, the history is repeating itself again.
Yes.
And David, what he's saying, David said, Nimeri regularly intervened in the process for choosing the president of the Southern High Executive Council, HEC. He played Abel Alier off against Joseph Lago. Molana, he plays against Alier. Nimeri Quest, he played Abel Alier against Joseph
Lago. Yes.
Yes. And he pressured the Regional Assembly in 1973 to accept Alier, and then in 1978 endorsed Lago.
Yes.
Who held the presidency for the 2 years.
Yes.
And he returned to the power in 1980. He appointed the Follow Denka tribal men to have the ministerial position in the HEC, High Executive Council.
Yes.
So now what Ambassador Emmnuel said from the
other source.
The other right also is now saying the same what Emmnuel said. Let me finish this one so you can continue.
Yes.
The same, yani Abelian Makaja Vitamanin and Musbita was there a Jabum Denka.
Yeah. The Moju isn't there an archive? What the law arguments are Moju?
They need to depend on behavior because a politician will guide Amoloda. This one. Let me finish so you can come in. To some extent, Nimeri was pitting the Denka, the largest ethnic group, against non-Denka and especially Equatorians, who live in well-set part of the South Sudan. Alier represented Denka and Lago Equatorian. From this point on, Lago and his supporters campaigned for separate Equatorial region in the effort to avoid Denka domination. Kalam they mentioned, Al-Khatib de David, he mentioned the Nasal Katabo, Fua Hadisumu Wando, and Lesk, page 6, Alier Bordu, Alier fi Senate, he mentioned Alier also, he quote from Alier fi Tizmia Nenu Tizain, 185 لعدد 204 عنده كتب ليست بيج 50 ل 51 جونسون البيج 42 ل 32 بسويك from صفحة بيج صفحة 201 لصفحة 3 سو واصل مولانا أمانويل.
Edward Bajmandis, these are very good points. And we are not here to just argue for the sake of argument. Okay? The fact that Abel Alier brought the half of cabinet dominated by Dinka, these are known facts. It's not fiction, leave alone these two different writers. You go and read the literature, of during the regional government from 1972 to 83. That is a fact. There's only somebody who want to argue for the sake of argument. Abel, his government was highly dominated by the Dinkas. Anyway, so let's continue. So you could see that Nimeri was playing games. Okay.
Exactly.
And this is what they wanted earlier in terms of the plan that the National Islamic Party had of how to divide South. Now they found South Sudanese having this problem among themselves. This is speeding up, the initial idea of how to undermine the agreement itself by North Sudanese. So Nimeri played Abel against Nimeri. Now, when Gizmal Abdullah Rassas was appointed as the president, of the High Executive Council, Nimeri wanted something from him. Nimeri wanted him to carry a referendum. To carry a referendum on the issue of redivision in South Sudan. He wanted to carry this. But somehow Nimeri feet went cold. Nimeri feet went cold, and instead of calling for a referendum, he called for elections. Now, of interest is the winning of James Tumbra. Joseph James Tumbra. Now, James Tumbra was very close to Joseph Lago. And people said, in fact, it was Joseph Lago who encouraged Tumbra, to stand for presidency. Now, interestingly, some supporters who used to be part of Abel Alier camp, they also went and joined James Tumbra. Notably, Maulana Dola Achwil. Maulana Dola Achwil supported the redivision, and he stood with James Tumbra. Now, James Tumbra was elected. He won the election and became the president, and he appointed who? He appointed Maulana Dola Achwil as the vice president. So James Tumbra Azandi became the president, and then Dola Achwil Maulana became the vice president. Let me look for these important issues on this. Now, when James Tumbra, by the way, became the president, and Dola Achwil became the vice president, James and Lago was also appointed now vice president, Nimeri. Joseph Tumbra did not push very hard again, for redivision. This is also important. James Tumbra became a little bit quiet. And one of the reasons why James Tumbra did not embark straight away to redivision and dividing South Sudan according to what he was fighting for in the election, James Tumbra spent most of his time in Khartoum with Joseph Lago. Yes, he was the de facto president. He was the de jure. He was rather the de jure president of the High Executive Council. But Maulana Dola Achwil became the de facto president of Southern Sudan at that time. James Tumbra was spending a lot of time for Khartoum, like Salva Kiir was spending a lot of time when he was vice president, spending a lot of time in Junub rather than spending in Khartoum. And then Riek became almost like the president, or vice versa. Now, the Equatorians, and majority of them who have been demanding for the issue of redivision,
why, Maulana, you mute yourself?
Okay.
Yeah, I unmute you.
Okay. Yeah. So many of the Equatorians, they became very angry with this issue. That this guy was no longer talking about redivision seriously. So what they did, For example, the Commissioner of Eastern Equatoria. The Commission of Eastern Equatoria at that time demolished the huts of Dinka residents and revoked licenses of the Dinka butchers, even those who were in Juba at that time. And also there were riots among the students in Juba, and 2 Equatorians were killed. So situation became very tense, and then Nimeri decided to divide the country into the 3 regions, what became known as Kokora, and the rest of the story is well known to us. So what I wanted to do, Edward, is to stop here because it's going longer. But let me rely on your question that you may ask and the audience so that we could have an interaction. But what I would like to conclude is this, okay? Addis Ababa Agreement was signed as not by the government of Khartoum, not from the strategical point of view. It was the tactical agreement to them to achieve their short terms, okay? So Sudanese also, the Anyanya, the SSLM, were very naive in agreeing on the provision of the agreement without looking at it carefully. The security arrangement that came in the Addis Ababa Agreement, having 3 separate armed forces, the Southern Command, the Central Command, and the Northern Command, this was not followed well. They were hurried up and they were absorbed, into the Sudan armed forces, into the police, into the wildlife. Hence, Anyanya did not have any army, or what we call the organic grantees, that would have guaranteed the implementation of Addis Ababa Agreement. Now, with also the political monopoly by Nimeri, dividing South Sudanese, fighting among themselves, actually Abid bil Abid, and Junubin now dividing themselves on this so-called redivision, South Sudan became a fertile ground for the implementation of the redivision and its weakening. So South Sudan became weak as a result. The Addis Ababa Agreement collapsed, and Nimeri finally said this agreement is no longer Quran, is no longer Bible, to hell with it. He introduced the Sharia law, and we know what happened next. The war started in our country in 1983. So this is a summary. I just wanted to pause, Edward. And anybody who's acting otherwise, we will always tell you haven't read the references are there. Quoting references does not mean we agree with it. It's just, it's actually providing support and credence to the argument that we are putting forth. Thank you, Bajmahandis.
شكرا. خليني انا داير قبل ما نسال اللي هنا الدرس اللي هنا نربط الحصل في 72 مع القاعد يحصل الان في جنوب السودان. انا داير نتفق مع كلامي تقول عشان المشاهدين. Sabata, we are waiting you. وليلى برضه وشويه send me a message. He said he need to join us. Also, the link please. لو في زول داير يجي يا جماعه, anybody need to come in please. I will share the link so you can come in. انا عشان داير اضيف لكلام مولانا في نقطه مهم جدا لكلامي قلته. هو في واحد اسمه نيلسون كاسفر, هو كان استاذ في واحد من one of the American Institutes of Study. عمل very important conclusion. قالوا كتب كاسفر concluded as early as 1976 that Nimeri, by meddling in southern region, political process was violating the spirit of agreement.
Yes.
Not that letter, برضو the Casper page 161 and 162. لكن المهم جدا انا عشان انت تعلم فوق هو قال لي شنو؟ قال southern politician contributed to the problem by failing to create a common destiny for the states and focusing on competition for the public office.
Yes.
What are you saying about this, Moulana Emmanuel?
No, he's right.
Take this statement and compare 2005 until 2011.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. Junubin became preoccupied with the positions in the government. They became preoccupied with their regional politics and tribal politics. And this is the unfortunate part of our Southern Sudanese people. Now, what have we learned from the Addis Ababa Agreement? We have not learned anything. If you look at the so-called revitalized agreement now, ARCES, that was signed in 2018, the same mistakes that Anyanya did is the same mistake the opposition did vis-a-vis the government. Let me tell you why. Now, in Addis Ababa Agreement, as I said earlier, Mansour Khalid Maulana and Dr. Mostokhar, who is a lawyer, and Abel Alier, they made sure that the provisions of the agreement are vague to create loopholes so that Nimeri could have enough room to maneuver and to interpret the provision of the agreement the way they want. Precisely this is what those of Michael Mokwe did, and I mentioned this in one of your shows. Okay.
Yes.
Now you look at the issue of division of the states. As we speak today, the country is facing coronavirus. Okay. Coronavirus is killing a lot of people. But you have no governments in the states. People in the states are left without governments. Why? Because the provision in the revitalized RCs gives the divide the states on 2.7, on 0.8, on Marif 2, 3.5, وكلام الفارغ الموجودة. Okay? This kind of provisions were meant by those of Michael Mukwe and the rest to be, a landmine. So when you come to the implementation, they say no, 5 point something, it meant 6 states. Okay, 2.7 it only meant 3. 0.08 it meant nothing. 1 point something it meant something. Okay, those are the obstacles that has been put in this agreement. So the opposition never learned anything. But fundamental to Addis Ababa Agreement is the issue of the military and the security arrangement. Anyanya 1, Lago, rather than ensuring that the security arrangement that was agreed in Addis Ababa of having 3 regional forces, the Southern Regional Command, the Northern Regional Command, and the Central Command, which is the United Command from the South and the North, Lago became so busy, okay, and he became an instructor Hinak. He was busy, preoccupied, with the training and all these things, rather than him making sure that his forces, and their security arrangement has been implemented. They were naively trusting Nimeri. Nimeri made sure that all the Anyanya forces has been observed. Then there was no longer any threat. There was no any longer threat. There was no any longer organic guarantee. As Garang puts it, Garang always say, you must have an organic guarantee. Organic guarantee that Garang had for the CPA was the SPLA as a force. Garang did not make sure, did not make the mistake of observing SPLA into the government troops. By the way, Garang was a smart student of history. Garang CPA was based on Anyanya 1 security arrangement proposal. I said Anyanya 1 had 3 armies proposed. 1, Southern Command to consist of Anyanya 1 forces, Central Command to be consisting of North and South, and the Northern Command consisting of North Sudanese. And this was mushtaraka. Okay? Yani jeshi ka Junub, Shomal ndo jeshu, Junub ndo jeshu, winda wada mushtaraka. Called Central Command. But kida, you create them, you build them as time goes. Garang managed to create 2 armed forces, 3 armed forces. Northern Sudanese kept their jesh bitam in Sahom and Junub. Southern Sudan, SPLA control it, and they have what they call the integrated unit to be a symbol of a unified army in case South Sudan vote for unity. Okay. Now, if you look at the revitalized RCs of 2018, the security arrangement which talks about creation of a new national army is nowhere. We don't even hear any longer anything about cantonment side. Coronavirus is khatam fil fetil. Litoriag now went to Juba as the first vice president without security arrangement. And now, before this coronavirus, he was only tasked with a cluster, being kept busy with other things that are irrelevant, Now, without security arrangement, Edward, Kir can just say, realize RSS, Ma Quran, well, a Bible, okay? And it can collapse at any time. There's no political will. There's no organic guarantee to it. So these are the things that we could learn. Finally, yes. Addis Ababa Agreement was signed because of pressure. By who? By the international community. That any agreement is better than no agreement. So what did they do? They forced the Anyanya 1 to sign an agreement that did not bring any peace. And Anyanya 1 was forced and pressured by the international community and by Southern Sudanese to reach any agreement as soon as possible. Revitalized RCs was the same. We were told that Junubin are tired of war. So it's better for us to have any agreement rather not to have an agreement. So opposition, what happened? Some of them who were weak, they were pushed in to accept the agreement, even with all the flawed bitao. Any agreement that does not address the root causes of the conflict cannot be sustainable. And this is the lesson from the history we are getting.
Yeah, another need to quote from Kalama Katabu David Ina, one other Rashan to Gumbordo we can connect it to the current situation. Then في كلام أنا لو قلت فوق قبل شوية هو يواصل قبل شوية أنا قريت إنه قلت the politician contributed to the problem by failing to create a common destiny for the Southerners and focusing on competition for public office, like what's happening now. So who got anti-Denka feeling developed in Equatoria, and bitter ethnic factionalism characterized secession of the Southern Assembly in Juba. This creating a situation that Nimeri could manipulate easily. Wakalamda, he referred to Allen 49 51 55 و56. That's why Emmnuel, another you need to compare about this kind also. The feeling is developing now in the country, So now another يعني داير تقرا تعاين الورق كده كلامه قلت قريت الكتب اللي قريته and look into the future and look into the current situation today in South Sudan. أو يعني ماشي في جنوب هسه يا جماعه الفيلم ده is also developing. It's not from Equatoria. It's developing everywhere within the country. So أنا داير برضو لأنه ناس اللي they were part of this mess and as بونا ملال and they are here. أنا شايف برضو هو كتب كلامنا عن بونا ملال إنه بونا ملال جاء قاعد يقول كتب statement قال الجنوبيين ما they were not interested in the central government. منو قال الكلام ده زول طبعا أنا شايف ده كلام كتبه بونا ملال هنا الكاتب ديفيد هنا قاعد يشيل الكلام بتاع بونا ملال. So it's look like يعني شغله كان بيع للشعب بتاع جنوب السودان والناس بتاعت المصالح بتاعه. The same situation مولانا Emmnuel, the same politician ياو الليلة كير ميارد they form themselves at GM Council of Elders and Kir is taking advice from them, Buona Malwal and Belalier and the rest. So
the danger of this is this. The mistakes that was done in the regional government are being repeated today by Mohandes Edward. It's being repeated in a way that is not good, in a way that South Sudan can disintegrate, literally. And I'm not making of a statement. Now, if you see, the regional government, it was Equatorians versus so-called the Nilotics. And the piece of people who are being accused of it is the Dinka-dominated government of Abel Alier. Now, Kir did not show any good example. Kir from 2011, you could see also his government becoming tribally oriented, through the Jing Council of Elders. And you could see the appointments, through the government. You look at it, is a tribal kind of a government. If you look now, it's even more dangerous. You look at the army now in South Sudan, it's tribally oriented army. You look at the national security, it's tribally oriented, So what is happening? It's not only now the Equatorians who are reacting to this political marginalization, to this misgovernment, and by the policy of Jingism by the Jing Council of Elders. Equatoria is reacting, Upper Nile is reacting, even in Barghazal, the Western Barghazal are reacting to it. So now, it's no longer an Equatorian issue, okay? It is an issue that engulfs the whole country. Now, the problem with this, Edward, is those who are part of this oppressiveness, what I call those who are the advocate of the fascistic Jingism ideologies and those of Jing Council of Elders do not see any problem. You and I and others who are talking about these ills that are happening in our country, they will tell you that you are tribalist. And imagine, somebody criticizing tribalism, you call him he's a tribalist because he's criticizing the tribal policy that you have, Now, the problem is that they're digging their heads in the sand. They're digging their heads in the sand. This Jing Council of Elders and this fascistic ideologue of Jingism, they're putting their heads in the sand and saying there's nothing wrong. We'll do what we want to do, come what. Okay? And that is very dangerous. Because once you say that you will do what you want to do, you will continue political hegemony and tribal hegemony and let others go to hell. Trust me, my dear brothers and sisters, others will react to you. Okay? There will be war in the country. Now, if the war is started in the country, we'll not only be calling Equatoria, calling for their own independence. We will not longer be regionalism anymore. We will not even be federalism. Okay, Upper Nile will call for independence. Okay, Equatorial may call for independence. Western Bargazan may also opt out. So the whole country will be destroyed. Then the question is, what will the Jin Council elders would have benefited from? That's why we are saying the cries of your people. When your brother said you were sitting on me and you were hurting me, you better listen to what they're saying. So that you said, if I'm sitting and I'm hurting you, my brother, I'm sorry. How am I hurting you? How can we live together as brothers and sisters? This is the dialogue we want to have in South Sudan. That let us look at the dialogue of how we can create harmony in South Sudan. But you will still have people who are still living in dinosaurian times of history, and who live in a time that has frozen in integrity. They still believe that the ideology of tribalism can succeed in 21st century. These ideas of tribalism, okay, will never succeed anywhere in this modern world we live in. The thesis of a modern state is that we have to live within our diversity, to accept one another and live as one people. That's the message we want to tell the people of South Sudan, that let us forget about this tribal mentality of hegemony of a country. Let us live peacefully as brothers and sisters, and let us look at ourselves as South Sudanese. That can only come when we have an honest dialogue like what we're having tonight. Thank you, Bajmahandis.
Shukran jaziran. Thank you, Maulana Emmnuel Ajawin. Was very articulated. وأنا بشكرك لأنه أنت تمثل الdocument a reference, and that also is good when we are discussing. Like also, I support what you have been saying. But then in the document that Zol ismu David da, يعني this guy I love him so much because الكلام اللي كتبه هنا ده يعني كتب كلام ديري. This is a very important document بالنسبة لي حتى كلام بتاع جوزيف. That's why Joseph was saying إنه تعالوا ما في domination. Is supporting the idea إنه it is better South Sudan to be divided. Welcome, brother Sabata. And actually you listened to what he said by Ambassador Emmnuel, and I will give you also the floor then to add yours also, to agree or disagree by what has been said by Maulana Emmnuel, or to add more also, because we need to come up with a good analysis of Maulana Gibel, and to learn from what happened in 1980, 1982, 1983, and we still the division between Sudan about that, because learning from the history, mistake without that person will not be able for him to improve. And we are seeing now our country is falling apart. We are repeating the same mistake again, what we did from 1972 up to 1973. So you have the floor, my brother.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Edward. Are you listening to me clearly?
Clearly. Yeah, your voice is clear.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me a chance in this platform, and I would also want to greet all the audience who have come to participate in this very sweet discussion. Actually, Brother Edward, I would like to applaud Brother Maulana for all the facts that he has given and the analysis that he has shown. You see, the facts about the issues that has been happening around the times of the government of 1972, that is of the regional autonomy, are always addressed in many forms. And we are basically learning there are certain things that we could have actually taken from those things and actually applied them wisely as we are moving forward, trying to promote the agenda of a nationalistic South Sudan. We have learned based on the past, based on the government of 1972, Brother Edward, that the way the Addis Ababa Agreement was negotiated, it is true that there were some loopholes that should have actually strengthened the South Sudanese as far as understanding how to negotiate political agreements for the sake of building a better country. And out of all that has been mentioned by Brother Maulana, there is just something that I would like to hint as far as one of the weaknesses that the agreement was reached upon. Brother Edward, the Addis Ababa Agreement factually was something that was a deal between Jafar Nimeri, the president at the time, and the South Sudanese. It was not something that later got engulfed into what is called the Constitution of Sudan at the time, so that it becomes a protected deal, so that if Nimeri eventually loses power, the next president who would come in will not just toss that agreement out, but at least if that is to happen, will have to go through the parliament at the time in the central government of Sudan to protect the agreement itself. That was not the fact. The agreement was basically more of an act that was of 1972. It had a term, but the fact that it is an act, it was not amalgamated into the constitution of the country itself at the time, was more of an administrative decision that President Nimeri took at the time to give South Sudanese what is called an autonomy. And it was more of a quasi autonomy, because powers was actually contained in the name in the hands of Nimeri. That is actually a mistake. That if Nimeri, and it actually gave Nimeri the political power to decide to smash it whenever he chose to do that. And if Nimeri had not smashed it, if any other president walked in the place of Nimeri, could have just thrown that agreement. And this is the type of a mistake that that would ask ourselves the question whether we have learned something out of it. Have we really learned something out of it?
Based on how we have... Sabata,
yes.
Just let me remind the viewers, like there is some people down there, they are insulting and writing bad words. Please let us discuss in a political way. We are intellectual. And if you disagree with me, you disagree with Maulana Emmnuel, you disagree with Sabata, please let's do it in very good way. And also, we have the floor. I keep sending down the link, so anybody you can come in. Otherwise, anyone, you are not respecting yourself, just I will block you from watching the show, because you are not respecting yourself and the way you are writing the comment. So
yeah, it was somebody insulting people is not intellectual. Just delete him. We don't need insults. Anybody who want to come and he has a point, let him be brave enough, put a request. You come and face us rather than insulting people. Anyone who insults people, let him be deleted and blocked. We are not here to entertain nonsense from anybody. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. This is what I did now. Continue, Sabata. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is something that sometimes we'll ask ourselves: what have we learned from such kind of a mistake that has happened when the Addis Ababa Agreement was constructed at the time? I don't think that has been a lesson that got learned by many politicians, even though there are politicians that have learned. And Jongarang was one of those who have learned out of that, because when Jongarang really reached an agreement with the CTA, the terms of the CTA, he was cautious of so many things. But then the recent revitalized transitional government of national unity, when you look at it and its status, the way it was brought in, and right now at the time of it being amalgamated into what is called the revitalized transitional constitution, those games that are now getting used, in which some of the provisions gets changed, altered here and there, are certain mistakes that tells us that those politicians have not learned out of the past when they went and sat down to negotiate the revitalized transitional government of national unity. And then when we ask ourselves, how did that autonomy itself collapse? Yes, brother Edward, Nimeri from the beginning did not have the intention to implement the terms of the agreement itself, but the southern Sudanese themselves, the politicians who ran the autonomy, the government of the autonomy, engaged into certain practices that we would see as mistakes that we should have learned from, in order to shape us so that as we come forward to build what we have right now, we could have actually used some of those mistakes to make sure we build ourselves better at this time. Because, you know, if there are no clear evidences, Brother Edward, that Nimeri has pushed South Sudanese on policies against the will of the politicians who ran the regional autonomy at the time. In any case, there are evidences that the politicians during the regional autonomy time had a lot of disagreements by themselves. First of all, Lagu and Abel Alier did not agree so much. They did not look eye to eye on so many political issues, especially as Brother Maulana had referred to earlier, that when Abel came for the second time, the way he brought in members, especially in of the assembly, of the regional assembly at the time, angered what is called the equatorial politicians. And at the same time, the equatorial politicians also were wary of the fact that the number of people who are not Equatorians were growing a lot in the assembly, and that made them very, very uncomfortable. They wanted to grab more seats, and they decided to create that contention within themselves. So Lagu had a contention with Abel Alier throughout, and then you have all these contentions going on amongst the members of the assembly themselves. And besides that, in the local communities, the mostly Dinka who are coming from Bor into the equatorial area were so much in number that that isn't the problem. But then it resulted into what is called a cultural conflict that has brought a lot of discontent amongst the people, amongst the communities. So in every layer, starting from the layer of those of Lagua and Abel, in the assembly, amongst the community members, there has been contention, all right? And that has made Lagu and Abel every time and then going back to Nimeri with some issues that are going on amongst them. Lagu has been reporting about Abel, behind Abel, to Nimeri. Abel reports about Lagu, behind Lagu, to Nimeri. And Lagu accuses Nimeri of nepotism in the assembly. Lagu reports of so many problems in the assembly. And yet, Nimeri at that time also had some problems with the central assembly in Juba. He was sorry, not in Juba, in Khartoum. He was losing popularity from what is called oppositional parties, okay, who were actually basically going against his policies. And those who were actually parties who didn't even like the idea of the administrative action that Nimeri took of giving the Southern Sudanese an autonomy, you see. And so Nimeri found himself getting hit by those oppositions in central government. And then when it comes to the regional autonomy, these people are not even getting along. They are having their own problems that they tend to bring to Nimeri. So Nimeri, I am sure, underwent that situation where he felt like the autonomy is giving him more headache on top of the headache that he's already having with his oppositions that are encountering his policies in the central parliament. At that time, the idea of the decentralization came from Nimeri himself. He suggested that to Lagu. He said, "Look, if that's the problem that's really facing you guys, and it looks like you guys are having this contention going on in the assembly, why don't you guys just decentralize administration instead of all of you guys gathering in just one parliament? Why don't you guys decentralize this assembly so that the Upper Nile would have an assembly, and the Bahr al-Ghazal will have an assembly, and the Equatorians will have an assembly, and in this way, and that is, of course, the creation of the three regions. In this way, you will not go ahead and fight each other, because he realized that most of the contention that is going on in the assembly, or what's called the People's Assembly at the time, was just because of seats, because of the growing numbers of people from Bahar al-Ghazal, Bor, and Upper Nile, and also the Equatorians are not feeling comfortable. So he just felt this could be solved by the decentralization policy. And Lagu took that, ran with it, and produced it in the assembly as a policy that could be taken in order to solve all the contention that is happening with the people in the assembly. And that, of course, got interpreted to be the Kokora, that is the division, and the fact. You see, and I'm sure when Nimeri even introduced that policy to Lago as a suggestion that could solve the problem, the concept of it and how it should be implemented probably is not something that has been explained to Lago. And when it was brought to the Southern Assembly, that actually created a chance for the local communities who felt that they're even getting enough from the cultural conflict that they are facing from the people who are settlers, who are coming from out, who are not typical Equatorians, especially from the Bor area. So they actually grabbed that chance and said, well, it got then interpreted in a way that the implementation should be that not only those who are not Equatorians in the assembly go to their areas and establish their assemblies there, but even the local communities, those who are originally not Equatorians, should even vacate, should leave the territories of Equatoria, the lands of Equatoria. And eventually that is how the whole thing was brought and implemented in that way. But what do we learn from this that could have actually shaped us to be better in the current time, Brother Edward?
Yes.
We could have realized that type of a cultural conflict where that hindered what is called policies that could have built us to become one nation should have been handled very carefully when the call for what is called South-South dialogue was called. You see, if our politicians felt that, okay, now we have a chance, a referendum has happened, the Southerners have already voted for this country. Now, instead of just rushing, creating that constitution, that's the transitional constitution that we had, that actually gave a lot of powers to Kiir. What could have been done is people could have reflected to how the administration, the challenges that faced the administration of the government of 1972, and to realize how also those cultural conflicts played in bringing about all the Kokora. And that could have actually helped the people to realize that in this case, maybe let us start by even decentralizing or devolving powers such that we should not all slam ourselves in one place, and so that we will not repeat the same problems that we have committed in the past. But then, unfortunately, really unfortunately, what we are seeing is basically a repeat of the past mistakes, where power has been centralized in one point, and basically what has happened right now is power has just shifted. Let me say the majority of those who are called Equatorians now find themselves in the underdogs, okay? And the policies that Abel had been implementing in the past, where he played nepotism a lot, that actually made Lagu very uncomfortable and brought all that wrestling, whereby Lagu reported him to Nimeri again and again, actually is now being played in this government of the SPLM, basically a repeat of the same things that had taken us into problems in 1972. And as Brother Emmnuel has placed it very, very correctly, that if we continue to keep pushing on these policies, eventually down the road, this is not going to help building what is called one nation. You might realize, brother Edward, that the same government that could have actually built the communities, the nation, and bring them, implement policies to mold them to become a melting point or melting pot, is basically playing politics of right now arming a particular group, as allegations now coming out that they kept arming what is called the Murle group youth. Murle goes and attack the Nuer. Tomorrow, next tomorrow, the same guns going to be used against the Dinkabor. Dinkabor will be displaced, will continue to pour into the eastern side of Equatoria, and will continue to saturate the area of eastern Equatoria, Nimule, Pageri, and some other areas. And as this practice continues, more and more Dinka pour into Equatoria. This would eventually, because I'm quite sure Equatorians, as time go by and as these things keep happening, at the end of the day, these guys might end up figuring out that, you know, it looks like we don't have a government that would be able to protect. And eventually they might end up creating their own fighting units. And at the end of the day, the country might turn out to look like Somalia, where people will just have clusters of fighting units and eventually turn out not to be good, as Brother Emmnuel has narrated here, for the future of the country, which is not really good. For now, I will end here.
Yeah, shukran jazir. Thank you, my brother Sabata. I think we came to the end of the show. Gablima Negdi Maulana Emmnuel to make also comment and final statement, and I give you also some minute to make a final statement. And then what the Mushahdin, my brother Arcangelo. Nobody fish Mima Bedena show Mafizol, nobody insult the Bila Bita Denka. What I mentioned, we mentioned the name based on the history and the quotation and Lena Gerena in Kutub can Ambassador Emmnuel Kanana. Lanina Benavish Tarikh, what happened in our history. Bezad the hustle fi Neno fi Junuba Sudan, Ma Ben Neno Sabain, Ladit Lado Tamanin. And Nina Kuna Junubin, we have to agree. At Tazwir Bita Tarikh, it matters the result already. The Tariq is there. And Nasal Khan, we mentioned them Gibil, they are not Barrier, they are not Latuka, they are not Shuruk, they are not Nuer, they are not Denka. Then Nasal, they wash and Nasal Shah the Tariq or Katabu Tariq. Lizalik, Nina, Zakarna, Al Haimana Bita Rabal Alir, Ujab al Gabila, Wazara Min Gabila Bita. That is history. It matters the Tankuru, what Taksim Bita Jinu Sudan, Vitala, Tamanin, Ala, behavior Bita Rabal Alir, in addition to Moab Bita from Muhammad Nimeri. Ambassador Emmnuel Ajawin, he mentioned this. So, I'm going to Maulana Emmnuel, and in a Benijihina, we are not here to attack anyone. But when we are telling the history, history is history. You like it, you don't like it, you have to hear it. History, and we are South Sudanese. And in here to correct the history. Normal correction, the history between Junuba Sudan. ده تاريخ كده الممارسات اللي قاعد يعملوا سلفاكير الليله ده سلفاكير الليله ده مستر وزراء الناس كله مع دينكا are you going to انت هتقول شنو؟ كل الوزارات كلها كان الوكلاء كان جهاز الامن كان شنو كلهم دينكا are you going to tell us خليك يا اخي ما في زول كلام we are watching we are seeing this with our eyes nobody can tell us that we are seeing it the we are living with it so we need to correct this لانه بكره لما النوير يجي في السلطه انا ما دايرين نويراوي يمسك ونص بتاع الوزراء كلهم وكل المحلات الاساسيه في الدوله 3/4 بتاع الوزراء كلهم 80% من الوزراء يكون من القبيله بتاعه. This is what Salva Kiir doing and this is what Abel Alier did في الفتره بتاعه لما حكم في جنوب السودان and that why lead to redivision بتاع جنوب السودان. Low, if we do not watch what's going on in South Sudan now, that one even much forget about the redivision. That one would lead to the separation of South Sudan into the pieces. Ambassador Emmnuel Ajawin, let me give you the statement and further.
No, thank you, Edward. Kalamak du kullu sah. You know, this is the problem we have with some of our Dinkas, brothers and sisters. You know, this oversensitivity will not take South Sudan; it will kill South Sudan. This, whatever the defensiveness they're having today, It's the same defensive attitude the Arabs were having. When South Sudanese were talking that we've been marginalized from the center of power, the Arabs said, well, akin ma yaw fi munu hina, fi Peter Garkot hina wazir, fi Aldo Ajo hina wazir, fi Angelo Bede hina wazir. Utu mahamashin kefa junubin, ma utu akhwana. Okay? When we said we're economically marginalized, we go like in Fushunu, we always give you what you want. But in reality, we continue fighting. Why? Because of marginalization. If our brothers and sisters who are in the government today and some of the supporters of this regime, this fascistic tribalistic regime, think that, criticizing such a regime is criticizing the whole Jing. First of all, we are talking about Jing Council of Elders. Now, many of the Dinka supporters here will tell us that Jing Council of Elders does not represent them. But when we criticize Jing Council of Elders, they will come and jump and say, well, you're criticizing Dinka. But in the Jing Council of Elders does not represent you. So why are you being oversensitive when we're talking Jing Council of Elders? Listen to this, and those who are watching, let them listen to me and read my lips.
Okay.
Junub Sudan, no single tribe will force its hegemony on the people of South Sudan. It will never happen. It will never happen. Okay? What we need in our country is for us, as South Sudanese, to live in our diversity under a federal form of governance, federal democracy, where there is a devolution of powers, where there's a devolution of wealth, whether you come from Equatoria, or you come from Upper Nile, or you come from Barghazal, you are a Southern Sudanese face. Okay? We want a country where South Sudanese are first-class citizens. We don't want a South Sudan where there's first class, second class, and third class citizen. Okay? My dear brothers and sisters who are supporting this regime, people come to power through accident of history. Power cannot be maintained by force. Power can only be maintained by the will of the people. Soviet Union, one of the most powerfulest countries on earth, in comparison, similar to the US, disintegrated. Why? Because that unity of the former Soviet Union was by force. But when people start realizing that they don't want to be part of that unity, there's nothing you can do. That's why you have Ukraine, you have other countries that have broken up from the former Soviet Union. Yugoslavia was the same result. Sudan Mushkan Yusuf Wahad, Arab, in comparison to the population of South Sudan. No Sudanese are more than us. The Sudan population is 15 million, and South Sudan is 10 million. That means they were actually even 40 million more than us. Okay? If it's 1-to-1, we cannot defeat them. But the will of Southern Sudanese people defeated them. So no single tribes in South Sudan can live in an imaginary world that you can defeat the will of South Sudanese. It is a matter of time. And I always say it's a matter of time. The wind of change is coming, my brother Edward. And those who are living in Juba now, you are living in Juba because there are some regions, regional countries are supporting this government. Regional politics is not permanent, my dear brothers and sisters. Tomorrow could be change in Uganda, that you will not even anticipate, and things can get uglier. We are saying rather than waiting for things to get ugly in South Sudan, let us correct it and we start learning to live as one people. Let us learn from Addis Ababa Agreement. Let us learn from the politics of Kokora and the politics of redivision so that we could benefit and enrich ourselves as South Sudanese so that we could have the stability in our country where we respect one another and live in peace. Anybody who thinks that they will impose their tribal ideology on people are wrong. And anybody who thinks that here government will live for 100 years is someone who is not normal. It's actually an insane person because history actually will argue otherwise. With that, Edward, I think tonight we have given the topic the due respect and we have examined it critically. وحللنا ودينا كل الاهتمام يعني شفتها. I think we have done our part and we have also interacted with our people who are faithfully watching, and we want the message is let's go on as a united people of South Sudan. Dinka, Mundari, Shuluk, Anyuak, Lokoro, Faratit, Murle. Let's work as a people of South Sudan united. Let us not try to oppress our brothers and sisters and sit on their backs. And when they're telling you, you are hurting me, you say, shut up. I will sit on your back because I want to. That will never take us anywhere. Thank you, Bajmahandis.
Thank you, Ambassador. Sabata.
Also, my brother Sabata.
Yes.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. As Maulana has stated, everything that has been discussed right now, hopefully it gets to be taken positively. Nobody intends to hurt anybody. These are just facts being said. And I just want to put for the record, as Molana had brought the name of Idi Amin earlier. Idi Amin is actually a Kakwa from Uganda. His father is from Koboko, and his mother is a Kakwa from Congo. But the areas where his father and mother comes from, of course, long time ago used to be known all as territory of Sudan. That is why sometimes people say, oh, you know what, this guy might be a South Sudanese or Sudanese. But his father is from Koboko, and Koboko at this time is under Uganda. So basically, he's a Kakwa of Uganda. His mother is a Kakwa of Congo. And I would like to apologize to you, Edward. I've been having a problem with these links in order to get into a show. This is not only with your show. It's happening with pretty much almost everybody's show, including those of Mujasif's show. I will only be able to get in when the link is posted on the page itself. So it took me a long time to struggle. I went home from the truck. I'm right now in the truck. I went home. I grabbed my tablet. I thought it's just my cell phone, but again with my tablet, it's acting the same way because I really thought it was. I could have got in through the Chrome. So I really apologize for the fact that I had to struggle all this time. I couldn't get in, but towards the last minute. And thank you very much. Hopefully next time things will be better.
Yeah, thank you very much, my brother Sabata, Ambassador Emmnuel Ajawin. Shukran. Baden يعني أنا بشكرك أمباسادور إيمانويل لأنه أنت قاعد تقرأ لأنه الناس زي طبعا بيفتكروا إنه شغلانة يعني زي الشيء يتلخبط تيجي شو كابلة كوباية بتاع ويسكي وبعدها تمسك من الطرف. No. يعني sorry, people need to go and read. You can come and talk fact. That's why الكلام قاعد يقول إيمانويل جبال سير السفير. You need to go back to reference, so you need to read them. يقرأوا للناس ليه؟ لأنه هنا ده research. هنا ما دايرين نكذب للناس، دايرين نقول الحقائق. ولو انت لقيت مرجع ثاني برضه تعال قوله.
come and quote it.
You are not the one documented our history بتاع جنوب السودان. لذلك الناس ما تزال. بعدين لما إذا قالوا مثلا لو في حاجه في تاريخ يمنشن انه شلو في يوم من الايام مثلا زي لويجي ادوك practice the tribalism, we will accept it. No شلو الجامن واي ليه شلو لو مثلا حكومه عبر اليرنا لو كان وقت ده لويجي ادوك او كان الرئيس بتاع مجلس الاعلى لجنوب السودان او ما سيقول وعين المجلس كله شنو ما كنا نيجي نقول لكم هنا because هو شركاوي زينا. This is nonsense. نيجي هنا ده ونقول لكم انه one of the mistake يجي ادوك ما سيوديك الثلاث ارباع بتاع الوزراء زي ما كتب قبل الدنك بشويه قالوا انه قبل اللي في the first term he did well. الحكومه الاول he did well بس جاب كل الجنوبيين. The second part he shift he changed. man كويس جاب وزراء كلهم ثلاثة أربعة بدهم كلهم من دينكا ودي هذا كان حصل في وقت ده في جنوب السودان. So why people don't want to accept this؟ مولانا إيمانويل قال الكلام ده معناه ده يعني إيمانويل ده قاصد قبيلة ولا إدوارد قاصده. Please you have to يعني التفكير التعبان والضيف ده let us put it up. هنا دايرين جنوب السودان يبقى to develop وزي ما جبال سمينا يعني وانا سألت مولانا إيمانويل السياسيين الجنوبيين ديفيد قال انه السياسيين الجنوبيين هم زادهم كان بيصاروا في السلطه. اي كده انا بالضبط نسال امباسادور ايمانويل بيكوز القاعد يسال في جنوب السودان وني ناس مع مرض كورونا فيروس.
The same thing.
ما فاضل المواطنين بتاع جنوب السودان وده اسئله تخلى قبليه مهمه ممكن نقول الفرتين بتاع جنوب السودان. الناس اللي بتفتكر انه كلام بيقولوا ده Delhi, please go back and study the Tariq history carefully. So by this, Ambassador,
thank you, Baj Mahandis. Thank you very much, and we hope to encourage and we wish to encourage this intellectual debate. That when you come also to the debate, please bring your references so that at least we know. But as you said, you're quoting a guy called David, and I was quoting a lot of guys here too. So let us quote and then analyze properly. My uncle said, all these are subjectives. These are what we call the third sources. We don't need third sources. We need primary source of information so that we could argue intellectually. Thank you, Baj Mahandis. I wish you good night, and I wish your audience and Brother Sabata here also good night.
Wish you good night, Ambassador Emmnuel, and wish you good night, Brother Sabata. Good night. Yeah, good night. شكرا للضيوف بتاعنا اليوم. شكرا جزيلا لأمباسادور إيمانويل أجاوين وكذلك شكرا لأستاذ ساباتا رامبي للمشاركة وده شكل الحوار اللي دايرينه. الناس ما تزال يا اخوانا. انا قاعد اقول الناس ما تزال بعدين زول انت لو شايف انه كلامه بيقولوا ده فيه حاجه غلط يا اخي انت مالك ما ترتبتين. We share the link with you. Come up. We share the link with you. Gana select the link. Why we are sending you that link? We are sending you that link so for you to be able to come in and discuss with us. Let us argue based on the scientific research. So for بهذا أنا بشكركم مشاهدين صوت الشعب. ما بقاصدنا يزول ما بنفسه بيزول, but if we are telling the history, we have to tell the history as it is. We will not tell the history in favor of أي ما هو مكتوب جبال اللي بنقوله ده كده. So we have to accept it and change our attitude. An attitude بتاع القاعد يصل we have to change it because history now is repeating itself again. And جنوبين الناس كله they are reading, all of us everywhere. We thank God we have technology in the internet. حاجات كله موجود في الانترنت. فالمهم شكرا لكم وشكرا للمشاهدين منبر صوت الشعب. نلتقي ان شاء الله يوم السبت. في النهايه هنينا دايرين جنوب السودان وطن لنا كلنا, وطن مستقر بعيدا عن اي نزاعات وقبليه والكلام ده. we don't want it في بلد بتاعنا, لانه لو قلنا قبليه ما هيستقر. nobody going anywhere. زي في واحد كتب جبالنا nobody going anywhere. 64 plus we are South Sudanese and you want it, you don't want it, will remain in South Sudan. Upper Nile will remain, Equatorial will remain, Baragazal will remain, the three regions will remain, and the people and the tribe, they will remain in South Sudanese. Yeah, Finihai will agree. Now, I know at the end, all of us as South Sudanese will agree. So good night to all of you, brother. Thank you for watching the show.
منبر صوت الشعب, الرأي والرأي الآخر, شعب واحد ووطن واحد.
Baby,